Grand Theft Auto 3, a revolutionary game with one of the first truly open cities players could explore at their whim. Despite being a huge gamer growing up, I never owned the game or truly played its story. But 20 years later, I figured it was time to finally delve into the trilogy and fill in my gaming knowledge gap and see how these milestones in video game history hold up. So I finally picked up GTA 3 with the trilogy's definitive edition. It's definitive. Nothing could go wrong, right? Oh no. Oh no!
Oh shit, here we go again.
Okay, I honestly didn't plan on the definitive edition being a hot coffee mess, but that's what I got, and that's what a first-time solo player like myself gets to tell you about today. I decided to start playing out of order with Vice City, because I'm a badass law-breaking thug who breaks all the rules. Also because I always loved its 80s retrowave aesthetics, and that is one thing that stood out to me while playing the game on my PS5. And I mean that specifically because I played the game on both my Switch and PS5, and the Switch version is total crap. But oh, don't you worry, we'll get into that. The environments of Vice City are at times gorgeous to look at on the PS5. I love the pink and blue hues that come in during sunset, and it makes driving around the city all that much better. In fact, Vice City was a prime example of showing off just how powerful my new PS5 was. This baby was running on overdrive, processing all of the polygons. The character models during the intro walked like completely normal human beings.
Realism.
The realism and proportions of the NPCs truly unmatched for a graphical upgrade.
Definitive.
I found this bikini-clad girl in the streets of Vice City only to turn around, run to the end of the block, and see her twin within draw distance of her. Sexiest GTA of all time.
Sexy.
This dude, I can't keep up with this charade. What is this mess?
Definitive.
Okay, so the graphical upgrade is not great beyond some of the environments. In fact, while I downloaded this game on day one for the PS5, there was a patch available a couple weeks later, and instead of fixing the game, the 20-year-old game now stuttered and I had to switch on performance mode to play the game without dropped frames. A game on my PS5 that looks like this.
Now you're playing with power.
And on the Switch, the game is even worse. In docked mode, the Switch will stutter every time you drive, no matter what. And this is what an explosion looks like in Vice City, uncut and with no editing. Okay, graphics aside, how does the gameplay hold up for someone like myself who decided to play a famous game far beyond its prime? Well, while it feels dated, it's not in a bad way. The gameplay is still fun, and honestly, some of the wonkiness of early 3D is hilarious in a good way. While the spectacle of an open city you can freely explore isn't what it was before, as many games now incorporate this to a grander scale, I still appreciate this, and Shenmue are where it came from. And this particular playground is still fun to explore, with driving around learning every avenue for a quick getaway being a blast. It's not overwhelming, and I think that's something that's often overlooked in absolutely massive open world games. When a game is too big, it can sometimes lose focus, with many things existing just for the sake of making the game bigger, without a genuine gameplay reason. The physics of the vehicles feel absolutely wonky at times, but in a way, it also makes them feel arcadey thanks to their physics, which again, isn't a bad thing. I mean, sure, sometimes I would spin in an insane way, but it all really just cracked me up. The mission structure of the game is simple, with a number of short missions you can complete relatively quickly. Again, it's honestly nice to go back to something a little more simple, where missions involve you needing to catch invincible pizza delivery boys who deliver pizzas by tossing them onto the ground. I'm just saying, I hit him with my car off of his scooter multiple times and shot him, yet he still will not die. Is he actually a pizza delivery god? The pizza god himself? While the gameplay is still fun, the dialogue, well, let's just say it's no Red Dead Redemption 2. there's a lot of dick in this game.
And I'm gonna mail you the dicks of those responsible.
When the giant shark comes in and just bites their dicks off.
All I have now is dickheads. Dickheads everywhere, yo.
The writing is more juvenile, which is fine, but it definitely makes the game feel dated. Sadly though, as much as I enjoyed meeting Sylvester Stallone and hanging out with the most attractive girl I've ever seen in my life, that's how elbows work, right? It was time to move on to GTA 3, just GTA 3, because I have deadlines I have to meet. Now this was truly the game that started it all. The game that was so violent, it caused absolute outrage, and today, it feels kinda quaint. Sure, I could attack anybody in any way and steal people's cars, but it wasn't overly gory and actually pretty cartoony overall. I'd give it a 3 out of 10 offensive rating on the offensive meter, with a 1 being Super Mario Bros. And a 10 being the Zelda CDI games. But, history aside, time to immerse myself in GTA 3. One thing you'll quickly learn in GTA 3 is the importance of getting paint jobs on cars. You learn this through your first boss, Luigi, who has you murder someone he doesn't like and then change the color of his car to teach him a lesson. Yeah, I'm sure his ghost is looking down like, what the f***? That was my car! It's supposed to be blue! I hate red! Okay, yes, I realize the point was to steal the car, and changing the color makes it harder to find and therefore easier to steal, but I like this narrative. In fact, if you have a giant wanted level and cops are right on your tail chasing you, by getting your car painted right in front of them, suddenly they have no idea who you are anymore. Video game logic at its finest. Oh, sorry, it's still Dave talking to you. I can understand why it was confusing, being that I'm wearing different clothes and all. Honestly, going back and playing the original GTA 3 is, it's okay. While I appreciate the history of it, the writing is a notch down from Vice City. The dialogue and cutscenes feel like they're trying way too hard to be edgy. Just like how the humor in my videos is very try-hard. It hurts because it's true. And, more importantly to me, Vice City was the game that introduced riding motorcycles, and I really miss that. Again, there's some odd quirks I'm not sure if are part of the original game or were botched on the port. The horrifying NPCs, like this lady who walks like no human I've ever seen, and how did they approve this NPC for the final release? Or this guy with a different mustache hair color from his normal hair color. Those were definitely not in the original game. Also, while this was a minor issue in Vice City, the rain in the original GTA 3 is more like a torrential downpour every single time it rains. This also wasn't an issue in the original game. But other things I wasn't so sure about, like while I was doing the mission Drive Misty for me, the ice cream truck was non-stop playing over the mission briefing audio.
The Don's son, Joey Leone. He wants some action from his regular girl, Misty.
During firefights, the lock-on of these games are absolutely garbage. And I mean it when I say they're terrible. Half of the time the game will lock onto a random NPC instead of who you're aiming for. And as it turns out, that terrible aiming is specific to the Definitive Edition. The originals had far better aiming mechanics, and I actually had to manually switch back to the original controls, even though this was my first time truly experiencing the game. At the end of the day, while GTA 3 definitely feels the most dated within this trilogy, it's still nice to see just how much fun the developers seem to have with the game. From hidden nooks and crannies, to random posters spoofing on films, like this Badfellas poster, or the fact you can do things like stealing an ice cream truck. Even though the missions are basically either you driving somewhere or shooting somebody, they really tried to vary up how you'd have to do these activities, and I really could tell how this became a classic back when it first came out. And really, a lot of it was about the games you could create for yourself. Hey girls, you want a wild time? Honestly though, I didn't spend too much time playing the original GTA 3. I decided to instead focus most of my time on playing the most popular GTA game, and one that I'd actually never played before, San Andreas. And right at the start, we're introduced to a new mechanic, bicycles. Also, literally on my first mission to go home. Yep, this is the Definitive Edition, alright. Something I somewhat knew, but still pleasantly enjoyed, were all of the new mechanics brought to San Andreas. And I'm not just talking about new vehicles. There's much more customization to your character, which adds more incentive to play the game. You'll be able to actually upgrade your skill at driving various types of vehicles, as well as your general stats. And honestly, I'm an absolute sucker for RPG mechanics like these, so I was all in. On top of that, now you can customize your digs, get haircuts, and even gain weight by eating too much food. Now this is the gangster life. Grove Street, son! And speaking of Grove Street, there's now gang warfare where you can take over turf, multiple cities, and the ability to date girls who have their own relationship stats, and oh my god, what did they do to your face? Well, time to impress her, I guess. Handsome status 0? What? Good thing the game has another new feature, working out to gain muscle and lose weight. Oh, and as this is the definitive edition, don't you worry. I found a barrage of bugs. I especially appreciate that in the very first emotion-filled cutscene finding out your mom is dead, Carl's hands look like baseball mitts. This pizza guy whose bottom lip goes up instead of down when he talks.
Enjoy, sir.
This guy who had a magical floating blunt. Shootouts where enemies seemed to forget they were dead. This supersonic car. That also caused a bunch of accidents. I went into this club where floating people were dancing to no music. I'm not cutting the audio of this gameplay, there's just no music. Stealth killing enemies, like this. Sure. This car that attached to me like a magnet. I'm not joking. I'm going to fast forward the footage so you can see. This mission, where CJ's neck was stuck inside the car seat. This rolling blob that turned into a cop. Or this other cop who decided to pop down from the ceiling and float inside of it, shooting at me upside down. Or even falling through the ground. While all of this is hilarious, and most of these things probably weren't in the original game, there are some things that honestly don't hold up too well today. For example, the game has a number of DDR-style missions, and they just feel out of place and aren't particularly enjoyable. Yes, they're mini-games, but it just made me wish I was playing Guitar Man instead. Meanwhile, some of the races are poorly conceived, and it's not because racing is a bad idea, it's actually a really good idea in a game that involves you constantly driving around. It's more so that some of the races are pretty long, and you have no idea what the course is. You only get to see one marker at a time, with an indicator showing a vague direction of where to go next. All the game would have needed was a second yellow marker, and this issue would have been solved. Also, it needs to be said, Zero's RC plane mission is an absolute nightmare. The controls are horrendous. I consider myself to be a pretty good gamer, so it was actually a huge relief when I looked online and found out that there's actually a common consensus about this one. Zero can get fucked. The car AI is oftentimes awful, and while it can be hilarious, like in the instance of when I finished this mission right here, typically the car AI is notably dated, and is the reason why I'll never trust fully automated cars. The point about the cars isn't necessarily a negative, as I actually kinda like how wonky the car AI is. The point is that the AI itself feels kinda dated. Similarly, it's kinda funny to see absolutely no consequence for a mission where you basically murder an entire army of National Guard soldiers or entire army of police and SWAT. And the fact that chugging sodas is a good way to replenish your health. On top of the gameplay, the game's humor also feels a little dated. Pretty much every single cop joke in this game, aside from them being corrupt, is that they love donuts. And while I honestly don't care, it's just the type of humor that 13-year-old me would probably find hilarious. But 34-year-old me just has a different sense of humor now. But you know what? Playing GTA San Andreas for the first time, I do understand where the love comes from. Exploring San Andreas, San Fierro, and I didn't have time to get to the Las Vegas section before writing this video. All have a unique charm to them, and San Andreas is definitely the best of the 3 games in terms of gameplay. For aesthetics, I'll always hold a soft spot for Vice City, but I definitely love the mishmash of missions in San Andreas, the wild and weird characters, the feel of each city, all of the vehicles and ways to play in the sandbox of San Andreas, and of course, the RPG mechanics. Honestly, it was a good time, even though I was playing the definitive editions. Obviously, that's not the best way to play these games, but you know what? It honestly made for a memorable first true playthrough of these games in its own way. I feel like playing all of this GTA 3 has transformed me. In fact, I think it's time to take what I learned from playing the GTA Trilogy into the real world, like every parent's worst nightmare. Now I too was Grove Street for life. If you don't serve their dicks on a platter for me, I'm going to cut off all of your dicks, sew them into a dick purse that holds other dicks inside of it. Capiche?
Dave, I think this is an HR conversation, not, Dave, are you okay? Dave, what are you doing?
Get me those dicks.
Okay. All right.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, I made another similar video playing Cyberpunk 7 months after its release to see how it played after a number of patches. I hope you'll check it out.